I'm very pleased to be following the honourable gentleman for East Antrim, who has put on record a great deal of fact and truth about the way the Northern Ireland issue has been treated in the negotiations and by the negotiating parties. What he missed out in his remarks was, of course, until the Varadkar government was elected, this wasn't an issue. The expectation was that there would be an invisible customs frontier in Northern Ireland, and that was confirmed by Bertie Ahern when he gave interviews on the subject. It was confirmed by the head of the Irish Customs Organisation when he gave evidence to the Irish Dáil. It was confirmed by John Thompson, the head of the Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, when he gave evidence initially to the Treasury Select Committee. This was not an issue until it was made an issue. And we're being asked to believe two extraordinary things. One is that the Irish Republic itself might put infrastructure at the border of Northern Ireland, when the only reason the Irish Republic itself recognises that there is a frontier between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland is because they signed the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement. And the other thing we are being asked to do is, of course, when President Juncker appeared in front of the Dáil a few months ago and was pressed to give an assurance that he would not force the Republic to put infrastructure at the border, he more or less gave that assurance, and actually what was perfectly clear is that he was not going to say, we will force you to put infrastructure at the border. So it's clear that the EU is not going to force anyone to put infrastructure at the border. And finally, it is still the policy of the government that we might leave even without a withdrawal agreement on WTO terms. Under such circumstances, we are not going to put any infrastructure at the Irish border in Northern Ireland. And we will challenge the Irish Republic and the EU Commission not to do the same in the interests of peace in Northern Ireland. It's perfectly possible to manage a frontier-free customs frontier in Northern Ireland, and of course that is what will happen. And it is pure obstinacy on the part of the Commission that they will not negotiate with the United Kingdom a free trade agreement on the basis of making an agreement with the whole of the United Kingdom instead of excluding the Northern Ireland. I give way to my honourable friend.
Very grateful. He's making some very good points. I certainly don't argue that we should be members of Customs Union, but the Freight Trade Association recently talked about a situation where a trailer full of 40 different consignments goes from Birmingham to Belfast and then goes into 40 different white vans in Belfast. How does he propose we would track and meet our responsibility to pay customs on the...
Immensely grateful. Can I encourage the right honourable gentleman to draw his remarks in close? He's within his time, but there are a lot of other people wanting to speak, and I'm also being pressed by people who quite understandably want time. So if the honourable gentleman, with his brilliant eloquence and pithiness, can wrap up in a minute or two, that would be marvellous.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to answer that point, I think we have to be practical that there will be a change in the way people treat consignments because they are crossing a customs frontier. But actually, as the technology develops, it will be possible to track individual consignments or multiple consignments in trucks, and we've discussed this with the Customs and Revenue in this country, across customs frontiers as the technology develops. And in the end, in the future, looking ahead 10 or 20 years, the idea of customs frontiers existing between countries that trade tariff-free will become obsolete. It will become obsolete. So to hinge our entire Brexit policy on the question of not having customs declarations and customs frontiers is very last century, and we shouldn't be captured by that. Mr. Deputy Speaker, my remarks are directed primarily at Amendment 72, which I confess has turned out to be disappointingly uncontroversial. And I have to say it was the intention of ERG, a group of Conservative backbenchers, to table 4 amendments to test our understanding of government policy. One or two of those in the light of the Chequers Agreement and the White Paper, but to to understand what it is the government was intending, because every single one of our amendments, we believe, reflects government policy, and I wouldn't imagine that the government would have accepted any of these amendments as calmly as they have if they don't reflect government policy. I do think that my right honourable friend, who seems to be becoming a Remainer again, judging from his article in the Evening Standard, oh yes, that's what he said. Oh, that's what he said. He said we'll have to rethink Brexit completely if we can't get a satisfactory arrangement. That's the direction he's going. I respect his view, but I think that throwing around insults like useless is not elevating the debate. The amendment that I'm proposing, Amendment 72, simply removes an extraordinarily powerful Henry VIII provision in this bill, that we should be signed up to a customs union with the European Union simply by order. And I thought what is source for the gander, in fact, the amendment that my right honourable learned friend from Beaconsfield applied to clause 9 of the European withdrawal bill, I thought what is source for the goose is source for the gander, and I don't suppose I shall hear him speaking against this particular amendment, because this puts Parliament back in control of the decision to join a customs union with the European Union, and that is what I think we should do. And I just end on this one point, Mr. Speaker. We've heard a lot about 40 MPs having an excessive amount of influence in this chamber. In fact, there are 17.4 million people who voted Leave in the referendum, and 70% of Conservative MPs represent Leave constituencies, 60% of Labour MPs represent Leave constituencies, and it would be bizarre if the House of Commons, which was elected predominantly on Leave manifestos, in the end puts roadblocks into leaving the European Union, and I don't believe it will.